ORDA Science Webinar 101 Series, Integrated Approaches to Andean Watershed Restoration, Strategies from Colombia to Bolivia. Organized by Hannah K. O'Neill and recorded by her via Microsoft Teams on October 10, 2024 at 17:05 UTC. Presented by Wendy Christina Willis, Confluence, USA, and Rodrigo Soria Auza, Armenia, Bolivia. Throughout this presentation, there are background photos showcasing the lush landscape, mountains, and biodiversity of the geographic areas being discussed.
You'll see a little red dot on your screen, and I will hand the controls to Wendy. And here we go with the integrated approaches to Andean watershed restoration, strategies from Colombia to Bolivia. Wendy, all yours.
All right, let's see. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get the ball rolling. All right. I want to echo what Tony said. Thank you to everyone today for making the time to be here with us. I've heard that this is a really frenetic time of year for everyone at the DOI, so especially thank you. I'm really excited for this opportunity to present our work. And I'd like to start with some key takeaways that I hope everyone gets from this presentation. When you leave here, I want you to be able to have a firm understanding of what integrated conservation means to us, how we see it in the field, and through that, I will share some community-based restoration models throughout South America to exemplify integrated restoration. And I also want people to leave here understanding that there are many, many more opportunities. As Tony mentioned, my name is Wendy, and I am a conservation social scientist. And I'm also a third-generation Mexican-American entrepreneur. I thought that restaurant work was hard enough, so I would hang up my apron and take a break from the generational cycle of restaurants and do something even harder, apply my passion and energy to conservation. I'm also kind of a chameleon because I've spent a lot of my life migrating back and forth between a lot of cultures. And consequently, I love people, and I love understanding how different groups of people interact with their environments. I've also worked in countries, and I've worked with myriad organizations at different developmental stages. And through this, I've experienced a lot of hazards of conservation. So I'm not going to bore you with talking about forest fires and urbanization and all the threats that normally comes to mind when we think of the work we have to do for conservation. But what I will say, something that I've noticed in my career trajectory, is that there's a lot of work and opportunities, but there are insufficient people on the ground. There's also a constant desire to invest in activities, but I strongly feel that instead of just investing in activities, for conservation to be more resilient, we need to invest in the people that are doing the change on the ground. This is why I decided to found Confluence. And I see Confluence as a way to bring together those people, those opportunities, the ideas to help protect underserved Latin American ecosystems. And when I say underserved ecosystems, you may be wondering what exactly that means. Because I have built this extensive network of practitioners and I've traveled throughout the landscape, I've also stumbled across a lot of ecosystems that contain extraordinary biodiversity. And like I also said, wonderful people trying to do conservation work. But oftentimes these underserved ecosystems, and I call them that because they get overlooked. Their celebrity counterparts like Patagonia or Galapagos often are in the spotlight, Whereas these ecosystems, with some traction, with funding, with notice, could have incredible impact. So then why within underserved ecosystems should we be thinking about integrated restoration as a model? What I've seen and what I've learned from colleagues who are doing the work on the ground is that conservation must be integrated to restoration in order for restoration to be effective long-term in Latin America and elsewhere. Conservation and restoration must go hand in hand. We know that reforestation monocultures don't work. We know especially that invasive species like pine and eucalyptus, and you'll hear more about this from Rodrigo when he speaks, can have detrimental effects on the landscape. But we also know that restoration can't be successful unless we protect the healthy seed banks from which our genetic material for restoration comes from. Therefore, the biggest, most important take-home message of today is that restoration won't work without conservation. Thus, both need to be integrated. However, conservation results take time to ripen. Conservation doesn't happen overnight. I've had the privilege of helping to start projects. I've had the privilege of walking into projects midway through and then seeing them as they evolve. That's why graduated conservation models are key. And in order for graduated conservation models that take time to work, it's kind of like a recipe. We need certain key elements. First of all, we need resilient local NGOs. And as I mentioned earlier, what that means is we don't just need activities. We need commitment and sustainability so that local NGOs have the tools and the resources they need to maintain projects and programs for the long term. But having resilient NGOs isn't just enough. There needs to be not only community trust, but community buy-in. In South America, from country to country, land tenure rights have a big implication on how we do conservation, whether land tenureship is private or it's communal, and decisions are made as a group, as a unit through meetings, or cooperatively and collectively getting a large group of landowners to agree to do something that's beneficial on the landscape level. And this is where I like to give an example of an awesome opportunity and project that I visited in Colombia in Meta, which is a seasonally flooded landscape where rice is the primary agricultural production. And it was in this area that a group of conservationists took me to visit some model farms, and they were showing me ways that bird-friendly rice production could occur on the ground. And they took me to this incredible farm with a family that was super dedicated to experimenting, to adapting bird-friendly practices. And in my eyes, I just saw opportunity. I wanted to scale the project. And when I went to the NGO and I asked the conservationists, what can we do to duplicate this? They looked at me and they said, unfortunately, this is a situation where the community does not want to engage in conservation. We've been working in this area for over 10 years, and what we found is that we will commit resources and time to those who want to work, but there are other farmers in this community that don't. So now that's an example that stands out a little from the others, but the point is that whether you have full buy-in or some buy-in from a community, working with communities takes time. You can't just parachute in and expect to make change and then walk out. As you'll see through Rodrigo's presentation and the organizations that I'm going to represent today in my talk, these organizations are committed. They're committed to long term. And when we think of long term, we also have to think about, well, how are we going to tackle climate change? I don't need to bore you guys as well talking about how climate change is affecting weather cycles. And especially this is pronounced in the Andes, our focal area. But what I can tell you is that as we think about climate change and as nonprofits and conservationists also ponder how to make change on the ground, what we have learned is that water can be the unifying discourse. Water is the driver and the motivator for social change and protection. And especially when we consider the importance of water in high Andean forests. A lot of people have heard of the metaphor that the Amazon is considered the lungs of the world. But figuratively, if the Amazon are the lungs of the world, then we have to think of the Andes Mountains as the arteries that deliver the water or the air to the lungs of our world. And I am not a hydrologist, and if there are hydrologists in the audience right now, excuse my rudimentary explanation of how hydrology works in the Andes. But what I will tell you is that what starts at the top flows down. And this is incredibly important when we think about watersheds, because watersheds support everything that's below. And in the Andes, what this can mean is that watersheds can support incredibly enormous urban environments. In fact, 70% of people that live throughout the Andes live in urbanized environments, and all of those places need water. However, the other 30% or so that live in rural environments also need water. And a lot of these folks, their livelihood strategies are dependent on agriculture, on cattle ranching, and it's all tied to water. And when we think about integrated conservation and restoration, the unifying element can be water, because water in watersheds, in healthy watersheds, that is, that are restored or that are at their optimum ecosystem maintenance level, is a key to helping to re-achieve some of the balance. For my segment of this presentation, I'm going to focus on two elevation gradients in which watershed restoration can occur. I'm going to focus on middle elevation regions, and that's approximately 3,000 to 8,000 feet. And then I'm going to also talk about Andean plateaus in the south of Bolivia, generally above 10,000 feet. And Rodrigo will finish off with talking about high Andean forest. So let's travel to Colombia. Colombia is an incredible, incredible country with kind people, some extraordinary biodiversity. Over 1,900 species of birds exist in Colombia. If you put that into consideration, we have approximately 800 to 900 species in all of North America, if we include Hawaii and other outside islands. But Colombia also has complex socio-political context, and Colombia also is one of the global suppliers of coffee of the world. In fact, coffee is probably the #1 produced region of South America. So in this middle elevation area, we're going to talk about microcuencas. And in Spanish, a cuenca is a watershed, and microcuencas are essentially tributaries. In Colombia, I've had the honor of working with a group called Vivo Cuenca. They are an urban water fund in the province of Caldas that leverages taxes from water fees in the city of Manizales to pay for protected areas and the high elevation range of this portion of the Andes for water capture. But Vivo Cuenca also houses a sustainable landscape project known as PASOS, Paisajes Sostenibles. And PASOS had an important origin story because originally the biologists who began this initiative were housed under Senicafe, which is the research branch of the Federation of National Coffee Producers. However, 6 years ago, Senicafe cut all funding for conservation projects and research. So this has grave implications on coffee conservation in a landscape where for the longest time, technified coffee production or production without shade trees became the norm. That is why I consider this an underserved environment. It's an environment that can benefit from a lot of resources. And what my colleagues have done is that they've worked at the landscape level to restore. And when I say microcuenca, what they did, you can see on the left, is a map of a watershed in Caldas. And within this watershed, they have worked with 485 and planted over 210,000 trees. And that includes 174 species of native plants. Now, this project is tremendous and could continue to keep growing with more technicians on the ground. There's a lot of outreach that has to occur to make this happen. And as we talked about before, there has to be community buy-in. So for PASOS, for this program, community buy-in and trust takes different flavors. One is education from students, young kids, creating bird watching clubs, finding ways to make information about conservation and watersheds and the migratory birds that use coffee farms during their overwintering period, to working with farmers on their individual plots to ensure that they can have higher quality coffee production, and also incentivizing farmers to plant trees. We have to remember that conservation also requires incentive. And in this particular case, what PASOS does is they provide a small fee to farmers, a small payment, for planting trees throughout their farm. And then ultimately what the desired outcome is kind of like a nature's matrix, where as you start restoring the landscape, you have more connectivity between protected areas to other protected areas. You have landscape channels or greenways that allow wildlife to move between areas. And also you reduce erosion, you have more water retention in watersheds. And when we think about all of this, this process is ripe for duplication. There are other neighboring watersheds outside of Caldas, adjacent, where this project could be duplicated. And such a project of this magnitude could cost anywhere from $3 to $5 million, and within 5 years yield incredible results. Once again, this is possible, I will re-echo, because of graduated conservation, because of groups like Vivo Cuenca, being on the ground for so many years, building trust and getting the buy-in. Let's move on to Bolivia. Bolivia is another amazing country. And just like Colombia, if you haven't been there, I highly recommend Bolivia. Bolivia also has extraordinary biodiversity. Weird factoid that I like to throw in sometimes. Second to Mexico, Bolivia has the greatest diversity of cactus species in the world. I bet you didn't know that one. And if you did, you're probably more of a nerd than I am. But Bolivia, on the other hand, in the central Andes, also has extreme high rates of poverty in rural areas. And 2.8 million of the 12 million residents of Bolivia are indigenous. Also in Bolivia, politically, Bolivia's organized through a social collective decision-making model. And for Bolivia, we're going to talk a little bit about the Altiplano Sur and restoration opportunities there. So to give you a little bit of context, in case your geography is a little rusty. The Altiplano is a high plateau area that extends from Peru all the way down to the border of southern Bolivia and Argentina. And here we're going to focus specifically in the very bottom south corner, the Altiplano Sur, which this area also has. This ecoregion has at least 10 different ecosystems, untapped biodiversity, undiscovered species. It's also an area of 4 camelid species. Some of you may have heard of llamas. We'll take llamas, add vicuñas, guanacas, and alpacas to the mix. 2 of these species are free-roaming, wild, non-domesticated species. And this area also has a lot of municipal protected areas. And in this region, I've had the opportunity to work with a grassroots Bolivian organization, Prometa, who's helped to protect over 1 million hectares in this area, starting over 35 years ago. And in this area, their first pilot project was a national level protected area known as Sama. And most recently, they created Bolivia's first water fund for Sama, and they were able to drum up corporate support from 5 vineyards in this area, because this is also a wine producing area. And through this, they're able to help cover 75% of Sama's operating costs, which is extraordinary, because when we think about protected areas anywhere in the world, you may plant a flag and create it, but you have to think long term about how you're going to support it. So in this area, one of the steps towards generating community trust and buy-in is to enhance livestock management and sustainable agriculture practices. And this is incredibly important because this area houses some of the most incredible high Andean polylepis forests, largest forests, intact forests that I've seen in Bolivia. Forests that are thousands of hectares in range, beautiful forests that are also incredibly threatened by mining. Lithium is a major threat if not managed effectively in the Altiplano. Because it can really contaminate watersheds. And water scarcity is also an issue in this area. So when we're mirando hacia el futuro, or thinking about the future, one of the restoration strategies in this area is to map out and restore bofedales, or wetlands and high Andean plateaus that are beneficial not only for wildlife, for humans, and for downslope water needs. The other major conservation project in this area is establishing a conservation corridor that helps to restore and reconnect some of these high Andean forests, but also helps to bring capacity to these municipal protected areas through trainings, because the municipal protected areas are managed by each municipality autonomously. So there's a wealth of opportunities in this area, but I will leave it at that, because now I'd like you to hear from my dear esteemed colleague, Rodrigo, who I've also had the pleasure of working with over the last 9 years. And just remember, opportunities for integrated restoration abound. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me after this or at any point. And with that, I pass off the baton to Rodrigo. Thank you, everyone.
Wendy's email address is wwillis@confluence.ngo.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm going to share my screen. Please be a little bit patient until I manage to do it. Please let me know when you start seeing something.
Armenia, protecting endangered birds in Bolivia. Rodrigo is the executive director of Armenia, and his email address is rw-soriauza@armenia-bo.org.
Okay, can you see the
Perfect.
presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, I am Rodrigo Soria. I'm Bolivian, biologist. I'm the director of Asociación Armonía, as already told me, and Wendy already presented or introduced me. Armonía is a bird conservation organization that was founded in 1996 And we do more than just protecting birds. We do protect also the habitats where these species occurs, and we work with local people that live and have a direct or indirect effect on these areas where these species live. We are, Armonia is partner of several international organizations, including the U.S. Forest Wildlife Service, that has been supporting our work for over 1 decade now. So if somebody from EU Wildlife Forest Service is present, thank you. But today I'm not going to talk about that project that is being supported by the by this department of the U.S. government, but from the TUNARI program that we started 4 years ago in 2020, basically the year of the COVID, the hardest year to start a program or project whatsoever, I think, in the whole history of the last 2 centuries, probably. So this project, for this project, we are, Armonia is partner of, or is member of the Acción Andina initiative, which is a pan-Andean initiative that is very focused on restoring the polylepis forest, which is a high Andean ecosystem that occurs in the high Andes, of course. We also receive support from the Darwin Initiative, which is a UK government agency that provides funds worldwide. The Flanders regional government, which is a region in Belgium, and the Trillion Trees Initiative. So I want to present you or introduce you the TUNARI National Park, which is located in the center of Bolivia, in the central Andes of Bolivia, very high in the Andes. This protected area borders with one of the most densely populated areas in Bolivia, the Cochabamba metropolitan area, which is composed by 7 municipalities, at least 7 municipalities, that together sum 1.2 million inhabitants. And this, most of the people from Cochabamba is not aware of this, but over 80% of the water that is consumed by people that lives in the Cochabamba Valley, in the Cochabamba metropolitan area, comes from the TUNARI National Park.
Map showing the long section of mountains bordering Cochabamba to the north. Small bits are highlighted, showing the remaining native forest on the southern slopes. Circles indicate 3 areas where extreme events happened.
The southern slopes of the TUNARI National Park is a very unique area. It might be not as diverse as some other protected areas, but it contains unique biodiversity. Here you can see what is left of the native forest that used to cover the whole southern slope of this protected area. And as a consequence of this degradation that we have been experiencing along the last 100 years, probably or more, most of the watersheds or micro watersheds that runs down this slope and into the valley are very vulnerable to mudslides. And here I am highlighting the last events that have occurred in the last years. This is the Taquiña watershed, twice. Twice events have happened here, one in 2018 and in 2020, and in some other watersheds as well. And these are the most extreme events that have consequences that are fatal in lives and in infrastructure. But every year, every single year, we are experiencing floods that are affecting homes and also people. I want to share with you this picture. Oh, well, these 2 pictures that were taken in the same watershed, and this is already in the valley. It's an urban area, as you can see, taken before and after the mudslide that happened in 2018, and you can see the level of effect that this flood had. Entire houses were destroyed. lives were lost, public infrastructure was affected, and all in all, it was very fatal. So now, changing the subject and talking about the biological context of the Putunari National Park. Here you are seeing a picture of a native forest that is locally known as Cahuilla forest. This type of forest occurs high in the Andes between 8,200 feet and 9,850 feet, more or less, very high in the Andes. This type of forest is composed mainly by a plant that belongs to the genus Polylepis, which is endemic to the high Andes, well, almost endemic to the high Andes. There are in total from Colombia to northern Argentina and Chile about 40 species that belong to this genus, and every single species has a very localized distribution. The species that occurs in the southern slope of the Tunari National Park is called Polylepis subtusalvida. This species is vulnerable of extinction, according to the IUCN, and approximately 80% of the remaining forest patches that are composed mainly by this species are located within the southern slopes of the Tunari National Park. So, if we want to protect this species, this ecosystem, this is the place to work in, because this species doesn't occur anywhere else. But it's not the only one species that is threatened that occurs in this area. We do also have other plants like Cagenetia lanceolata, which has a very patchy distribution across the southern Andes of Peru and until the central Andes of Bolivia, also vulnerable. The Cochabamba mountain finch, which is actually the reason for Armonia being very concerned with this area. This species is threatened and is endemic to the of Bolivia. Most of these populations occurs in the southern slopes of the Tunari National Park. We do also have the Cochabamba water frog, which is also vulnerable of extinction. Endemic to Bolivia, most of its population also occurs in the southern slopes of the Tunari National Park. We do have the Andean cat. If you know a little bit about cats, this is one of the most mysterious and least known species that occurs in South America. It's not big, it's like a domestic cat size, but very beautiful, as you can see. This is not endemic to Bolivia, but it is endangered throughout its whole distribution. And we do have an isolated population of this species that occurs in the Tunari National Park. So, in summary, the Tunari National Park might not be as highly diverse as other protected areas, but it is biologically unique, and therefore it is one of the most important cave biodiversity areas in Bolivia. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the social context. The social context is complex, so I have tried to summarize this in the three most important aspects, so you have an idea of the area in the social context, of course. There were already numerous indigenous communities inhabiting this area way before this area was declared or as protected, as a national protected area, as a national park. Over 80% of the Tunari National Park belongs to some community. So they have rights and they are present there. And sadly, the administration of this national park, the Tunari National Park, was not able to deal with social issues. They were not able to integrate local communities into the management of this protected area. This has had very negative consequences for the relationship between these local actors, these two local actors, basically the local communities and the administration of the protected area. And I'm going to give you one example of this. What you are seeing right now is part of the southern slope of the Tunari National Park that is right in front of the Cochabamba city, the largest municipality in population that occurs in the valley. Okay, during the 80s, the government encouraged local communities to engage in large-scale reforestation programs. They planted basically pines and eucalyptus, which are not native, to protect the city from the frequent floods that used to happen during the rainy season. And here I would like to explain you that the rainy season in this part of Bolivia takes place between December and March, and the rest of the year is dry. So we have most of the year is sunny here. And local communities participated because they were promised that in the future, when this forest is already, I mean, this plantation is already grown, they were supposed to manage sustainably these plantations. So their familiar economies will diversify and improve. That never happened. The administration of the Tunari National Park, that depends from the CERNAP, which is the CERNAP is the institution that manages all the protected areas, changed its policies and prohibited completely the use of these resources, not in just this protected area, but also in other protected areas, which was not a good decision, actually, because this triggered or intensified the tension between local communities and the administration of this park. Also, we are talking about pines and eucalyptus. They are not the best species to regulate or safeguard the ecosystem services. They are not the best habitat for the numerous range-restricted, endemic, and threatened biodiversity that occurs here. So, very bad decision in many aspects. So, what we are doing, or what is our goal, is actually to restore native forests, recover its ecosystem services, and develop a social and financial sustainability, because this work is not a 3 years work or 4 years project or 5 years project. This takes decades. A forest doesn't grow in 5 years or 10 years. It takes time, especially in the high Andes, where this species, native species, grow very slowly. And to accomplish or to reach this goal, we developed a strategy that has 4 axes. Support the sustainable development of local communities, because they are the key actor. The land belongs to these communities. Of course, engage in restoration and protection of the standing forests that remain in this area. Despite being present a protected area there that is totally weak, we need to strengthen its management. We need to give a direction to the policies that this protected area needs to develop to improve the management of the area. And of course, develop the social and financial sustainability. I'm going to talk about this later. So, local communities are the key actors to work with. As I said, lands belongs to these people, and they have rights. And they are aware that by protecting and restoring the forests in their watersheds, their sources of water, will guarantee their water supply for the future. They know that. But they do also have urgent needs today. So to cover this and basically buy in the communities in this area, we help them to improve their irrigation systems, to make them more efficient. We built water reservoirs in several locations, so they have water available for the agricultural activities and consumption during the dry seasons. Please remember that the dry seasons in this part of Bolivia last about 8 months in the year. We work very closely with key actors in these communities to develop concept projects, and so far we developed 3, all of them very focused on diversifying the livelihoods of local communities and protecting the watersheds that are located within their community territories. Agroforestry, for example, beekeeping, and pesticides management, things that are of very important for these people. We also developed a strategy to further go supporting the sustainable development of these communities. And all this investment that we have done, the strength is with local people, has allowed us to restore and protect. 4 years is running these projects. During the first year, we managed to plant over 100,000 saplings, native trees, not pines and eucalyptus. The second year, we planted over almost about 140,000 saplings, and the number has been increasing year after year. As you can see, this last year we planted about 320,000 saplings, native trees again, and so far we have planted in 4 years about 750,000 native trees. Planting alone is not all we do. We need to keep track of the survival rate of the saplings that we are planting. And this is the data that we have been collecting every year after each plantation season, which must coincide with the rainy season. Again, that happens between December and November.
Survival rates: 82% for December 2020 to March 2021, 79% for December 2021 to March 2022, and 59% for December 2022 to March 2023.
We do not have the data for the last season yet, because the monitoring of the survival rates of the saplings that have been planted is conducted in November, by the end of their first dry season. So by the end of November, we will have the data for the last year. We need also to protect the standing forest that remains in this area, and also the areas that we are restoring. So we have formed brigades of forest firefighters composed by community members to combat fires, because fires is the most important threat today. Now, local people is not extracting wood anymore, but fires have become a major threat. So this is the way we are preparing local people to affront this threat, and it has worked. In the last 2 years, our units have been coordinating with other forest firefighters that are acting in this area to prevent and manage fires to affect the forest. Well, as I told you, we do also have this actor, the Tunari National Park itself, that is completely weak and needs to be strengthened. So in the last year, we have been training personnel of this protected area to monitor biodiversity, especially birds, because it's our specialty and is the easiest group to monitor. They have been integrated in the monitoring of the restored areas or reforested areas. We have also developed a protocol to monitor the water flows of the streams, of the watersheds that occur in this. And although we are not monitoring all the watershed, we are starting by some, and they are part of the team. And we also integrated the personnel of this protected area in the training courses that we have been imparting to form the forest firefighters, and also providing equipment. So what means social and financial sustainability? We are basically talking about the consolidation or creation of a waterfront that is going to support local communities, and the Tunari National Park, the protected area. And we have done already some steps in this direction. We have already conducted a feasibility and elasticity evaluation. That means that we have conducted survey. Over 1,000 interviews have been conducted randomly by each municipality, but also stratified by location, municipality, and socioeconomic status. No? And the most outstanding outcomes from this survey is that most of the people that have been interviewed recognize that it is important to support this restoration and protection program, because they see that the Tunari National Park is important for them. I mean, for water. Some of them are aware of this. It's the only area with forests in the whole area near Cochabamba, and several other reasons. But when we asked them whether that specific person, would contribute with financially to protect this protected area, the percentage of people willing to give a contribution decreases. But why? Because the first thing that comes to their mind is that, okay, if I contribute for the creation of a fund, then who is going to manage this fund? They assume automatically that the municipal government is going to do that, or the department government is going to do that. The level of trust in politicians is very low. So we need to work in a model that guarantees the transparency of the waterfront that is to be, we are planning to establish, right? We did also conduct a legal study because we wanted to know in detail all the municipal local regulations that exist, the departmental regulation and the national regulations that may allow us to create or shape the way in which this waterfront may work, the structure, how it's going to be managed, etc., etc. And yeah, this so far the outcomes tells us that there is no any legal regulation, whether local, regional, or national, that may prevent us, but we need to be careful in how can we sell this. I mean, the structure, the area. So this legal study is not finished. What I told is just the intermediate outcomes. So we still doing.
Map showing mountains bordering Cochabamba. 5 municipalities are in boxes, and the center one is highlighted in green.
Okay, what I have talked about is mainly focused in one municipality, the Tiquipaya municipality, where I live. This is the green box. And because of communities in other municipalities have seen how we are working with the communities in Tiquipaya municipality, they have in the last 3 years request us to also include them in the projects. We decided to do it as a pilot, as an experiment with some few communities in the other municipalities. But if we want to expand seriously the project, we need to think about replicating the model that we have developed in the Tiquipaya municipality, with the communities in the Tiquipaya municipality, to the others in a very well planned way. We also, it's clear for us that the protected area needs to be supported urgently. For that, we identified 2 things: develop a management plan and continue the training and equipment of the personnel. And this is the model that we have developed for the waterfront. It's not written in stone. This might change because we want this model to be developed together with as many local actors as possible. But this is the starting point, so to say. No, so we need to consider the creation or establishment of a water fund manager. I mean, an institution that is going to manage this fund, and create a governing body, a group of institutions or actors like civil society, the private sector, the same municipal governments, the regional government, the SERNAV that is the national office that administrates the protected areas, that supervise how this this water fund is managed by this new institution to be created. And it needs to be clear that this fund is to support local communities and the park. And when this fund is created, we need to have very clear how this money is going to be invested. And for that, we need to have already developed the strategies of sustainable development for all the communities across the whole southern slope of the Tunari National Park. And also we need to have consolidated a management plan for the protected areas. Only thus we can guarantee, only then we can guarantee that this fund is going to be transparent in the management and gain the trust from local people. Despite the preliminary outcomes that we have obtained through the evaluations that we have already conducted, we are completely convinced that a massive communication campaign needs to be put in place to gain the support of the 1.2 million people that live in this valley. They need to be completely aware that their future, our future, my future, because I live here, depends on how we decided to manage the southern slope of the Tunari National Park, because the water that we consume comes from there, and without water, there's no future. So we estimated we are developing a strategy, and we are aware that we know already that a 5-year project is needed to reach this goal, and that is the amount of fund that we need to accomplish with our dream. Well, thank you very much for listening to me, and I apologize for my English. I know it's not the best, it's not perfect, so but I am eager to answer any question that you may have.
Dr. Rodrigo W. Soria-Auza, Executive Director, Armenia, rw-soria-auza@armenia-bo.org.
Hello.
Great, thank you, Rodrigo. I will defer to Susan Lingenfelser, who will look for any raised hands or any chats in the chat box. Any questions in the chat box?
Yes, so far, no questions.
Okay.
Claire has a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Claire.
Right. Well, just wanted to say thank you. Can you guys hear me? My internet is saying I'm having trouble connecting. Is this coming through all right?
Yes, I can hear.
Great. Well, just want to say hello to Wendy, who I haven't seen in 20 years, I think. And thank you so much for the presentation. I could sit and talk probably with an hour for you about so many things, but one of the things that really resonated with me was just that one of the problems that we face, I think, a lot of the time with our own work is just that we're coming sort of from a federal perspective, often, at least for many people on the phone. I myself have a double strike, because then I come in and say, hello, I'm an attorney as well. And trust is such a hard thing to build when you're sort of working at a national level, but coming into smaller communities. And then you pair that with a capacity issue, which I think you mentioned on one of your slides about how we just need more people on the ground. And I think these are two forces that are sort of working against us and sometimes in our roles. And just wondering, thinking about translating it to the domestic projects we're doing here, what advice would you give us? What were some of the successful strategies when you come in to these projects to really engage the community in a way that leads to the results that we all want?
That is a very good question, Claire. Well, I'm going to add a couple notes, and I'm sure that Rodrigo also has some specifics. I think the number one element here is transparency. Transparency, because as a social scientist, what I've learned is when you go to quote unquote interview a group or engage with a new community, you're also getting interviewed as well. So transparency is key, because if you're very clear about what your intentions are, regardless of where you come from, I think that can help to open a lot of doors. And I will also echo what Rodrigo said, which is time. Like, just because you go to visit a rural area once, especially if you're an outsider, does not automatically open doors and build trust. It takes time and a lot of visits. Rodrigo, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Wendy. You're right. To build trust takes time, and visiting a community only once is not enough. Community, well, for example, when we started the project here in the Tunari National Park, we started visiting some communities in the Tiquipaya municipality, and the first thing they told us is, "Oh, here you come, conservationists. Oh, surely you are working with the administration of Tunari National Park, and sure you want to tell us that we cannot cut trees, we cannot expand our agricultural fields, and so on and so on." And we said, no, we want to know about you. We want to learn about you and the problems you have. And yes, we are very concerned with the protection and restoration of native forests, because my own future depends on what is going on here, what is happening here. But I'm not the one to tell you what you have to do, or what you can or cannot do. It took time, and we were constantly on probation, so to say. And what you say is not enough. What they see is what you do in all your visits, how you communicate. So you need to be, as Wendy said, honest. And if you're honest, the message that you give is going to be coherent with the language that you express, with the body language that you express, with your attitude, everything.
Okay, thanks. Any follow-up to that before moving to John?
No, just thank you. That really resonates. So I appreciate it.
Okay, John.
Thank you. Is this coming through?
Yes.
All right, good. I've been having mic problems too. Thank you, Wendy and Rodrigo. That was excellent, and thank you for your tireless work. It's also very obvious that you're both very passionate about your work, which I know a lot of folks here on this call are also passionate about. Similar conservation mission. Whenever I think about Bolivia, I think about the plight of Bolivian bobolinks and the stories I used to read about and hear about of poisonings, and that the birds are often viewed as pests, and how carbamate and organophosphate pesticides were being used to poison some of the birds. And you both spoke at least a little bit about agriculture. So I'm curious, have you been involved in any sort of integrated pest management or advising on maybe less toxic pesticides for the protection of bird species, whether it's for coffee or other agriculture that's going on in the regions you're working in?
Oh, go ahead,
Go
Rodrigo.
ahead, Wendy.
No, you go ahead. I'm muting.
Ladies first. I can talk about Bolivia after you.
Sure. I'll be brief then. My first engagement with that topic was in grad school because I studied the political ecology of shade coffee and Jamaica's Blue Mountains. And the researchers before me, what they had found was that when you have a certain amount of shade, it lends itself to more migratory bird species, which will eat the coffee berry borer beetle, which is a pest. So one of the things that farmers would do was cut all the trees because they thought that more sun would kill the pest, and then also spray. And what this research showed was that they were able to quantify the benefit of these ecosystems services of having birds. However, what I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen as well, is that we have enough information and alternatives. Often what ends up happening is that dissemination between the services, the alternatives doesn't always reach the field. And that goes back to not having enough field on the ground, not being able to share enough information, and not make enough changes. So I'll use that as one primary example, and then I'll hand off the mic to Rodrigo, because we could talk about this one for a while, but I'll let him talk specifically about Bolivia.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, John, right? Yes. Integrated pest management is not our expertise, but we have been collaborating with other organizations that are working in this field. And for example, in the capacitations that we had with community members, there was a group of women that was very concerned about this. They are mainly floriculturists. They cultivate flowers, and they actually realized that this is affecting their own health and the health of their children. So they wanted to focus this concept on this. And this is the second time we try to modify the agricultural culture in Bolivia. The first experience we had it in another project in southern Cochabamba. It's another area. It's an area where we have established a community protected area and a lodge that is designed to receive bird watchers. It's the best place in Bolivia to observe the red-fronted macaw, one of the two endemic macaws in Bolivia. Where we also started, and we had some level of success, but it is a hard topic to face because a national policy needs to be developed to control better the use of pesticides. There is almost no control, and of course this is affecting biodiversity and the health of people as well. So it's a very complex, and a lot of resources are needed to tackle this threat. We have had some successes, but these are very localized, local successes, I would say.
Tony?
Yes, thank you, Rodrigo and Wendy, for your presentation and answering questions. I just have a couple of comments and a question to go along with it. With the parallels that I see in your program with our program. You know, it requires a lot of public engagement and also public review. So they have ownership over what it is that you're doing, because you know, if you're managing a fund, as we do too, there's concerns about how it's being managed, and so they have input and they have that ownership. But at the same time, they want to be able to see the results. And my question is, how do you go about monitoring things that parallel our program? You know, the improvements and the cost of doing the restoration work, and managing things like you know, the resources, you know, that you're tracking. You mentioned ecosystem services, and those are similar words that we use, and it's of interest to the public, as well as not just what it provides in terms of the ecosystem and natural resource restoration, but also on the cultural and social side. So how do you track that?
Okay. Well, to monitor, to keep track of how the restoration activities are evolving, or basically the survival of saplings, we do establish permanent plots that we are going to visit every year. Well, 1 year after the first plantations, and then after a certain number of years. Now, regarding the some of the ecosystem services, for example, the water flow in some watersheds, we developed a program in which we integrated local communities, municipal officers, and the national park rangers, and they are measuring the water flow, not in all watershed, but so far in only 2 or 3, no, two, yes. They are taking measures every month, every 2 weeks actually, for the long year. So we have already, what is the name? Linea base. What is the word in English?
Baseline.
Baseline.
Baseline
Thank you.
data.
Baseline data, and we hope that this is a starting point, because we are saying, I mean, if we restore the watersheds, the regime of water flow in those watersheds is going to change. There's not going to be such tremendous water flow during the peak of the rainy season. It's going to be some of this water is going to be absorbed by the forest. So now we have the baseline for some of this, and it will be, what we want to do is to complete this baseline for the rest of the watersheds. We are in total about 35 or so. Okay. Now the social context, we did conducted a socioeconomic study at the beginning of the project 3 years ago, and the first evaluation some months ago, and some changes are now evident because of the water availability during the dry season has increased. The agricultural productivity from these communities in Tiquipaya municipality has also increased along the year, because before that they concentrated their agricultural activity in some part of the year. Now they can expand basically their activity, not in space but in time. I don't have the data right now, but I will be very happy to share the evaluation that we have conducted already. Okay. Don't know whether I answered, whether I'm leaving something unanswered.
No, actually, you answered very well. We're basically using the same terms, the same language in different hemispheres, which is exciting to know that you're
happy to
doing
know.
very similar things. And I anticipated that's what the question was, and that's I think that's something that we all needed to hear, that you're doing exactly what we do. And that's exciting to me. I think it's exciting to the rest of the group. And I applaud your efforts. They're very ambitious, taking this on in areas that aren't familiar, but I think showing the results is very good. And I think it's reassuring to know you're on the same track with the kind of things that we do. So congratulations. And I want to thank you both for your presentations today. I don't see any other questions or hands raised. So thank you very much. We'll stop the recording here and allow people to continue on with their day. So thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, guys.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.